11-6, Circles and Circumference. The main idea of this lesson is to be able to find the circumference of circles. Before we can start finding the circumference of circles, we need to review a few important vocabulary words about circles. The first word that I want to go over is center. The center of a circle is in the middle, and it's an equal distance from any point on the edge of the circle. So this point right here is known as the center. The diameter is the distance across the circle from one edge to the other edge, and it has to cross through this center point. So if I draw a line from this edge of the circle here through the center point all the way to the other edge of the circle, this is known as the diameter. Another word that we need to know about is the radius. The radius goes from the center of the circle to the edge of the circle. So from the center out to the edge here, and this is known as the radius. Now I'd like you to notice that the diameter goes all the way across the circle from the center through the center, and the radius goes from the center just to one edge. So that means that if you were to compare a diameter and a radius together, the diameter would be twice as long as the radius, because from here to here is one radius, and from here to here is the radius again. So that means the diameter is twice as long as the radius, or you could think of it as the radius is half as long as the diameter, because the diameter goes from the edge to the center all the way to the other edge. So if I were to make this blue line into a diameter, I'd have to draw another line over here that would also be a radius. The last word that we need to know about is the distance all the way around the outside edge of the circle is known as the circumference. And it's just a fancy word for perimeter. In other words, it's the distance around the outside edge of the circle. If you were to walk around the outside edge of this circle, you would travel the circumference of the circle. The last thing that you need to know about is the relationship between the circumference and the diameter. If you were to take the circumference, which we usually abbreviate with the letter C, and were to make it into a ratio or a fraction by comparing it to the diameter, which we usually abbreviate D, this ratio, no matter how big or small your circle is, will always equal the same thing. And if you divide those two things, you're going to get a special number known as pi. And pi, I'm sure you've heard about, is equal to 3.14, and it goes on and on and on forever, and it's what we call a non-terminating decimal. In other words, it goes on and on forever, and it doesn't repeat, and it doesn't have any sort of pattern to it. So this is known as pi. So if you take any circumference of a circle and compare and make a ratio out of it compared to the diameter, that special number is known as pi. We need to use pi 3.14, which is an approximation, in order to do calculations with circles. We can also write pi as a fraction, and it's normally written as 22 over 7 if you were to write it as a fraction. So both 3.14 and 22 over 7 both are equal to pi, and pi is the ratio of the circumference divided by the diameter. Remember, the diameter goes all the way across the circle, the radius goes halfway, and the circumference goes all the way around the outside edge. I like to remind students sometimes, in order to keep the diameter and the radius straight in their head, diameter is a longer word than radius, so the long word goes all the way across the circle, and the short little word radius goes halfway. That's one way you can try to remember it. So before we can actually get to finding the circumference of circles, we need to know the formula to find the circumference. And in words, it's the circumference, or C, of a circle is equal to the diameter, D, times pi, or 2 times its radius, R, times pi. Well, that sentence doesn't do us much good. We probably want an equation that we can use every single time. So here's how we can think about it. The circumference or c, is equal to pi times the diameter, or we can think of this circumference as 2 pi r. Because remember, the diameter is twice as long as the radius. So if you're given a radius, you have to multiply it by 2 in order to get the diameter first, and then you're going to multiply that answer by pi. So whenever you're going to be given a problem where you have to find the circumference of a circle, you need to choose which one of these formulas you're going to use. If you're given diameter, you're going to use this formula over here. And if you're given a radius, you're going to use this formula over here. Both of them will get you the right answer, but usually use this one when you have diameter and use this one over here when you have radius. So let's give this a try. We have two examples that we're going to use here, and it says find the circumference of each circle. Use 3.14 for pi. So that means in all of our calculations for these examples, we're going to use 3.14 for pi. So let's look at this first one. We have a circle here, and we have a distance that's given to us, and then we're told that that's 4 feet. So what we need to figure out first is this a radius or is this a diameter? And since it goes from the center of the circle to the edge, we know that that's got to be a radius. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at my two formulas and figure out, do I want this one or do I want this one? Well, since I have a radius, I want the formula that has radius in it. So that means I want this second one. Circumference equals 2 pi r. So I'm going to start by writing that down. C equals 2 pi r. Now that I have the formula written down, I'm going to substitute my length for the radius, 4, into this equation. So that means C equals 2 times pi times 4. So now we're going to go to our calculator because we need to multiply 2 and pi and 4. So remember, it doesn't matter what order we multiply, what order we put the numbers into the calculator because we're multiplying. So I'm going to go 2 times 4 equals 8. And then I'm going to take that answer and I'm going to multiply it by 3.14. And I get 25.12. So the answer for the circumference of this is 25.12 feet. So if you were to walk around a circle that had a radius of 4 feet, you would walk 25.12 feet. Let's take a look at our next example. So we have a circle, and they tell us the distance right here, this line, is 63 inches. So since this is a line that goes from one edge of the circle all the way to the other edge of the circle, this must be a diameter. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at my formulas and figure out which one do I want to use if I'm finding diameter. I want to use the first one because this one is with the variable d. So I go back over here, C equals pi times d. And now I'm going to substitute 63 in for d. So C equals pi times 63. We're going to go over to the calculator. 3.14 times 63 equals 197.82. 197.82. Don't forget to label it inches. So if you were to walk around a circle that had a diameter of 63 inches, it would be 197.82 inches. Here's our next question. It says find the circumference of each circle, and this time we're going to use the fraction 22/7 for pi. So here's our first one. Take a look at this, we figure out, okay, what information do we have? Is this a radius or is this a diameter? It's a radius. Go back to the equations. That means we want the second one. So C equals 2 times pi times radius. So now I'm going to substitute in my information. C equals 2 times, and this time we need to use 22/7 for pi. And we're going to multiply this times 21. So in order to multiply fractions, we need to turn these into fractions themselves. So you change 2 into 2 over 1. You change 20, we don't have to change 22 over 7, and 21 becomes 21 over 7. Whenever we multiply fractions, we can look diagonally to see if there's any diagonal canceling that we can, simplifying that we can do, and there is right here. 7 and 21, 7 can go into both of them. So 7 goes into 7 once, and 7 goes into 21 3 times. Now we're just going to multiply. 2 times 22 times 3. 2 times 22 times 3 equals 132. Over 1 times 7 is 7. So in order to simplify this, we need to figure out how many times does 7 go into 132. So 132 divided by 7 equals, it's going to go in 18 times. So 18. Now I just need to figure out what's 18 times 7. 126. So I'm going to go 132 minus 126, and that's going to be our numerator, 6 over 7. So there's our answer. It's going to be 18 6/7 feet if you were to walk around the outside edge of this circle. And here's our last one that we're going to do. We're going to look at this and see, are we given a radius or we're given a diameter? Since the line goes all the way across, this must be a diameter. We go back, that means that we want this first formula. So that means C equals pi, but remember, for this example, we're going to be using 22 over 7. So 22 over 7 times 70 for the diameter. So I'm going to write D. So that means C equals 22 over 7 times 70 over 1. Right, you look diagonally to see if there's any diagonal simplification that you can do. 7 and 70 both have the common number 7. So 7 goes into 7 one time, and 7 goes into 70 10 times. Now we just multiply the numerators together. 22 times 10 is 220, and 1 times 1 is 1. So we could also write this as 220 inches. So if you were to walk all the way around the outside edge of this circle, you'd walk 120 inches. So the key to circles is knowing the difference between the radius and the diameter, and knowing that the circumference goes all the way around the outside edge. Pi is the ratio between circumference and diameter. It can either be estimated as 3.14 or 22 over 7. You have two formulas. Circumference equals pi times diameter, or circumference equals 2 pi r, depending on what information you're given about the circle, depends on which one of these you're going to choose. And you can either be asked to use 3.1 for pi, or you can be asked to use the fraction 22 over 7 for pi. Just make sure that when you look at the circle for the first time, you figure out, are you given a radius or are you given a diameter? Make sure you write that formula down and then substitute the numbers in and solve.